Hello and welcome to JamHammer. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to paint Ultramarines according to the Warhammer 40k Imperium magazine. For those not in the know, Imperium magazine is a partwork series produced by Hachette and Games Workshop that provides you with a magazine plus miniatures or paints each week. As a subscriber, you tend to get 4 of these at a time each month, as well as a few free gifts spread out over several deliveries. I say tend to because there have been some widespread issues with people having delays on their orders, having the wrong things sent, or not receiving their orders at all. I've been a subscriber to their service for a few months, and I did have to wait for several months between orders recently, and have received a few out of sequence too. But things seem to be back on track now. If you've been following along with the Imperium series here on this channel, you'll know that I contacted Hachette a few times, and their problems mainly stem from them not being able to keep up with customer demand. In these videos, I tend to gloss over the content in the magazines in favour of reviewing the value of the included miniatures and paints. So for this video, I thought we'd do something a bit different and actually use the information in the magazine and see what results we get by following their painting guides. I haven't used any of the included paints so far, as I opt to use Vallejo paints instead, so this will be an interesting experiment using the recommended Citadel stuff. I also thought now would be a good time for this, as at this point in the collection, we seem to have all the necessary colours to get these models up to battle-ready standard. Way back in the 3rd issue from this collection, we received these 3 Assault Intercessors. These look to be the minis from this introductory paint set from Games Workshop. They're easy fit with pins to hold the models together in lieu of requiring glue. They also have these embossed emblems on their shoulders, meaning that they can only really be painted up as Ultramarines. Since this means they can't be put into my Dark Angels army, they'll be perfect specimens for following the painting guides included in the magazines. The magazine series works by slowly introducing more paints as it goes on, with the idea that you'll get new colours to add to your growing army over time. As such, the guides are a bit piecemeal. That said, in issue 13, we received a unit of 5 more Assault Intercessors and a more comprehensive guide to painting these with the Citadel paints gathered so far. We'll be using this then for the most part, with some extra bits concerning the accessories on the Primaris coming from issues 24 and 30. Starting off then, we'll be using this model throwing a frag grenade to test out this paint scheme. I'll also only be using what was included with the magazines for authenticity, so that means this will be painted with the starter brush included with issue 2. We'll begin with Macragge Blue, so going to take some of this from the pot and thin it out on my palette. The magazine recommends 3 parts water to 1 part paint, so something like this consistency. They then recommend 3 coats of this as a base. This seems a bit excessive to me, as I find that 2 thin coats is usually sufficient to cover over other colours. They also make no mention of priming their minis. I would always prime anything first to get a better texture to apply layers to, as well as making the paint more robust and less likely to chip away later. That's 1 layer down, and yeah, still a lot of that grey plastic showing through here, so definitely need another coat. I also just noticed in the guide that it says to paint all of the mini. You can see here that I didn't paint the holster, frag grenade, chainsword, etc. because these were going to be another colour down the line. No worries if you accidentally get paint on these, or if it's quicker to just paint them with that first layer, but to actually go to the trouble of painting these seems like a waste of time, and we'll be loading these areas up with too much paint, potentially obscuring detail. Speaking of obscuring detail, we have 2 thin coats of Macragge on now, and this is looking fine to me. That grey plastic is covered, and we have a nice smooth finish. But it says 3 coats, so on it goes. And here we have the Intercessor after 3 coats. Putting the previous footage after 2 coats side by side with this, and the only difference I can see is on those weapons and parts that had only the one coat before. I should also point out that 3 coats of this all over the Mini took forever with this tiny starter brush. Next colour now, and this is a weird choice, but we're going on to Leadbelcher. This is going on to all of the chainsword again, so goodbye unnecessary blue base. We're then putting a bit on the comms part of the Primaris helmet, as well as the exhaust vents on the backpack, and any ranged weapon they're holding, so with this one, that's the frag grenade. Putting Leadbelcher on now makes sense if you're following along with the series, as it was included with issue 4. But we're following a guide from issue 13, so this could have been updated. Having a black base would have produced better results, plus we need to change our water now, as it's got metallic flecks in it. Oh, so now we're doing Abaddon Black, and this is going on the casing of the chainsword. You can see this is quite streaky over that Leadbelcher, so this is going to require at least another coat. If you're counting, that makes 7 coats of paint on this part now. After applying this, you can see how nasty and chunky that is, with visible streaks. There's just way too much paint on there. We're also painting the rubberized joints of the armour. And these details underneath here that hold the backpack on. We also want to catch the housing of any other weapons too, so that's the frag grenade for this particular sculpt, but it would be on the bolt pistols too. On to Corax White now, and this is going on to those embossed emblems on their shoulders. This Ultramarine one on their left, followed by the Assault one on their right. And that's about it for this colour. Going back to another metallic now, and we're painting Retributor Armour onto the feather decoration on the chest of the armour. This is a rich, vibrant gold colour that goes on very smoothly with some excellent coverage. We're going to put this on the raised edge of the pauldrons too, including the elevated fin along that left shoulder. And finally, we're going to pick out the embossed emblem on their left arm too, plus the pommel of their chainsword. Starting to look very ultramarine now. But there are still more regular paints to go on, so time to go and change the water again to clean those metallic flecks out. Moving on to the content from issue 24, and we're a few paints richer by this stage, so we've got some Screamer Pink to apply. This is going on the rosettes of any purity seals, but shockingly, these figures don't have any. Don't think I've seen a Marine without at least one of these participation awards pinned to them somewhere. But this colour is also going onto the handles of the chainswords, so there is a little bit of this visible that I'll catch now. We've received Nuln Oil as well, so that's going on next. But this is only being applied to those parts we've painted with Leadbelcher and isn't used anywhere else. This seems like a bit of a shame considering this mini is looking a bit flat at the minute, and adding some depth with shade wouldn't go amiss. But we'll oblige and cover over the chainsword teeth, weapon metallics, and the backpack vents. That's it for issue 24 already, and now we're into issue 30 to apply some Mournfang Brown. This is being used on the holster here, as well as the pouches around the back of our intercessor. Now it doesn't mention the belt in the guide, but in the included photos, these have been painted, so I'll catch that as well, and then leave it to dry. Once it's dry, the guide says to go back to Leadbelcher and paint in the metal tip of this holster, plus an extra dot or two on the buttons of those pouches. We've received Mephiston Red with this issue as well, so that's very carefully going onto the eye lenses. This starter brush does at least come to a nice point for detail work like this. Also, worth pointing out that if you have a veteran sergeant to paint, then their helmet will be painted with this colour too, but leave the lenses blue. Final step from issue 30 now is to get our Nuln Oil again, and put a little of this over those areas we've just painted, so that's going onto the bolt pistol holster, pouches, belt, and then a little bit in those eye lenses. I'm just going to do a bit of tidying up here because, as you can see, I've slipped over onto the armour in a few places, so a bit of that original Macragge Blue is going onto those areas. And that's it! The Warhammer Imperium guide to getting your Primaris ready for battle. There's still a lot more that can be done to this mini to make it parade ready, but I assume as we're still many issues away from the end of the series, that extra paints will be included to elevate these even further. Although, I think there's a lot more that could be done with the paints that have been included. We could add back in some Mephiston Red and Mournfang Brown to re-establish those midtones. We also have Agrax Earthshade by this point, so we could add some depth to that gold. And we have a white paint, so we could brighten that Macragge a little to add in some edge highlights, or even just a light dry brush. Just something to break up all those large, flat blue armour plates. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoy it. If you did, please consider liking it, subscribe to the channel, and clicking the bell to be notified of new videos being released. Overall, I think this is a fine scheme for getting your minis onto the tabletop. I think that missing out on the primer was a mistake, and also updating the collected guide so that the order of paints made more sense would have been useful. Also, this took a long time to get one mini to this stage, as there was a lot of going back and forth between colours. Having the metallics in the middle of the paint session means we have to keep changing our water, which slows the process down even further. As does applying 3 layers of our base colour, especially with the starter brush. Strangely, they did include a medium dry brush with issue 11, so although this wouldn't exactly be ideal either, it would be preferable and a damn sight quicker. There'll be more videos about this Warhammer 40k Partwork series being released in the future, so please do keep an eye out for more Imperium content coming soon to JamHammer. In the meantime, there are plenty of other videos available on the channel, including a few that are on screen now for you to click on. Thanks again for watching.